The universe had a twisted sense of humor, but it palled in comparison to the irony unfolding in Laboratory 7B of the Galactic Research Consortium's Xeno-Behavioral Studies Division. Subject appears to be conscious, again announced the chief researcher, a lanky blue-skinned Taurian with 4 arms and a doctorate in 17 disciplines, none of which apparently included common sense, vital signs stabilized at what this species considers normal, which is frankly alarming by our standards. 3 different species of scientists huddled around a reinforced observation window. Their collection of tentacles, appendages, and sensory organs focused intently on the humanoid figure strapped to an examination table in the center of the sterile chamber beyond the human. A male specimen collected during what Earthlings dramatically referred to as first contact, but what the Galactic Registry logged as routine acquisition of underdeveloped planetary species number 4. 2291 H77D appeared remarkably unbothered by his circumstances. The consortium had perfected the art of species abduction over millennia. Technically, it wasn't an abduction but a non-consensual biological sampling with knowledge retention. The legal department had worked overtime on that particular bit of linguistic gymnastics. This is the 7th procedure we've performed, and its cardiovascular system hasn't even shown elevated stress markers, whispered an Arachnian researcher, her mandibles clicking with frustration. The previous 6 test subjects from more advanced worlds went into complete systemic shock during the baseline examination alone. Perhaps its brain is too primitive to comprehend danger, suggested a gelatinous blob of consciousness. That served as the facility's psychological expert. The human yawned. The researchers exchanged worried glances. "That's a threat display, right?" asked a junior technician, nervously adjusting his protective exoskeleton. "No," replied the chief researcher. "Apparently it's just tired or bored." He pronounced the word as if describing an exotic disease. Either way, it doesn't make sense. This creature comes from a Class 7 death world. Its species spends their entire existence surrounded by predators, environmental hazards, and their own self-destructive tendencies. They should be hardwired for fear responses. What the researchers failed to understand was that their subject, who had a name, thank you very much, not that any of these extraterrestrial geniuses had bothered to ask, was accustomed to much worse than lying on a clean table in a temperature-controlled room. Back on Earth, he'd worked nights at a 24-hour convenience store in Detroit. Customer service had prepared him for encounters far more terrifying than anything space could throw at him. The human shifted slightly against his restraints. "You know I can hear you right," he called out in a bored tone. "These walls aren't soundproof." The researchers froze their collective postures, suggesting they hadn't considered the possibility that their subject might understand the universal translator, another oversight in a growing list. "How unexpected," the chief researcher managed to say, attempting to save face. "The subject demonstrates comprehension capabilities beyond our models. The subject has a name," replied the human dry, "and the subject thinks your models suck, eh?" Moment of shocked silence followed this declaration. The gelatinous psychologist bubbled indignantly. "This is unprecedented. No test subject has ever criticized our methodology before." "Yeah, well, maybe you should stop abducting people who are too scared to call you on your—" The human replied, rolling his eyes. The junior technician made a notation. "Subject displays aggression through verbal communication." "Fascinating. That's not aggression," corrected the human. "That's sarcasm. You guys should try. It sometime might liven up those research papers you're probably writing." The chief researcher straightened his lab coat with all 4 hands simultaneously, a sign of extreme discomfort among tones. "We are conducting important scientific research for the benefit of all galactic species by kidnapping random people and poking them." "Yeah, that tracks." The humans' casual dismissal of their prestigious work sent ripples of consternation through the research team. The consortium's xenobehavioral studies Division held the highest clearance levels in 17 galactic sectors. Their findings shaped Intersea's policy throughout known space. And here was this primitive mammal from a backwater planet, questioning their methods as if critiquing a mediocre restaurant. We've studied over 900 sentient species, the Arachnian researcher informed him haughtily. Our protocols are refined to perfection, and yet you didn't even offer me a magazine while I wait. Customer service needs work. The human smirked a facial expression that set off proximity alarms in 3 different security systems designed to detect aggressive behavior. The chief researcher silenced the alarms with a practice gesture. Perhaps we should proceed to the next phase of testing, the fear response experiment. A murmur of agreement passed through the assembled scientists. Finally, they would see this infuriatingly calm creature demonstrate appropriate terror. Every species had its breaking point. The fear gas had been developed specifically to target the primal centers of any brain configuration, stimulating whatever neurochemical cocktail produced terror in that particular biology. Prepare the aerosolized compound, ordered the chief researcher, his professional demeanor restored by the prospect of returning to the familiar territory of the experimental protocol. And somebody adjust the restraints. I want accurate biometric readings when the fear response begins. As the team bustled about with preparations, the human stared at the ceiling seemingly, counting the tiles. In reality, he was taking inventory of his situation. 1 month ago, he'd been restocking energy drinks at 3 a.m. when a light hat appeared outside the store's grimy windows. He'd assumed it was a particularly ambitious tweaker, until the building had started to vibrate. The next thing he knew, he was being processed like a new arrival at the world's most thorough DMV. The human had spent 4 years in the military before his convenience store gig. He'd been deployed to 3 conflict zones and had once accidentally walked into a senior officer's performance review. His fear threshold was somewhere between active artillery fire and mom using his full name. These alien scientists had no idea what they were up against. Initiating. Environmental. SEAL announced the junior technician as airtight barriers hummed into place around the observation area. Fear compound, primed for dispersal. Begin recording all neural responses added, the chief researcher. This will be a textbook case. Study. The Arachnian adjusted a control panel with 3 of her limbs. Subject's baseline neurological state, logged cardiopulmonary functions, stable all monitoring systems active. Disperse the compound. Ordered the chief researcher, unable to keep a note of anticipation from his voice. The human would finally react as expected, and order would be restored to their scientific universe. A fine mist began to seep into the chamber through nearly invisible vents. The fog carried a slight greenish tint as it swirled around the recumbent human figure. The research team leaned forward collectively, various appendages poised over recording devices. The human's nasal passages detected the incoming gas. His brain processed the information, his neural pathways prepared for the chemical assault. And then he did something that would change galactic xenobiology forever. He took a deep breath. His lips curled into what his species called a smile, but what the security system categorized Asprey attack facial configuration. The monitoring equipment registered no spike in stress hormones, no accelerated heart rate, no pupil dilation, nothing that would indicate fear. Instead, the human turned his head toward the observation window and spoke 4 words that would eventually be archived in the Galactic Library of Historical Inflection Points. Kind of smells like home. The stunned silence that followed lasted exactly 8.7 seconds, a new record for collective speechlessness in the consortium's 0-year history. The previous record had been set when a Jovian diplomat accidentally dissolved during peace negotiations after mistaking cleaning fluid for a welcome beverage. Did it just... The gelatinous psychologist couldn't finish the sentence, its amorphous form rippling with confusion. Yes, confirmed the chief researcher, checking the readings for the third time. It appears to be enjoying the compound. The human's vitals had actually improved upon exposure to the gas his brain wave patterns. Showed a curious nostalgia response, and his muscular tension had decreased by 12%. The data suggested he was experiencing something akin to comfort. Impossible, declared, the arachne, all 8 eyes blinking in rapid succession. The compound is calibrated to trigger terror responses across 94.3% of all known sentient neural configurations. Perhaps the dispersal system malfunctioned. Dispersal functioning within optimal parameters chirped the lab's AI compound concentration at 34 parts per million and rising. The human, who appeared to be making himself more comfortable on the examination table, despite the restraints, sighed contentedly. You know, this really takes me back. Reminds me of summer evenings back in my hometown. The chemical plant down, the river used to release something that smelled exactly like this around sunset. Your species deliberately releases neurotoxins into your atmosphere. The junior technician's voice raised several octaves. Not deliberately, no more like enthusiastically, negligent. The human shrugged as much Ash's restraints would allow. The company eventually paid a fine. I think it was like $50 or something cheaper than fixing the leak. The chief researcher conferred quietly with his colleagues' mandibles and tentacles and various other appendages, gesticulating with scientific panic. This was not how the experiment was supposed. His throat loudly. Once again, I can hear everything you're saying, and it's not a fluke. Where I come from, this stuff is practically aromatherapy. You intentionally expose yourselves to neurotoxins for therapeutic purposes. The junior technician looked like he might faint, which for his species involved partial liquefaction. What? No. Well, not officially. The human considered for a moment, though, there was this one wellness influencer who sold industrial-adjacent essential oils. Pretty sure she got arrested. Eventually, the chief researcher approached the observation window, his curiosity overcoming standard protocol. Your species considers toxic chemicals familiar, comfortable. Not all of us admitted the human, just those of us who grew up in certain places. The places your fancy galactic maps probably mark as industrial centers or whatever. We categorize Earth habitation zones by ecological viability, corrected the chief researcher. The most problematic areas are designated as Class D habitability zones. Yeah, we call those neighborhoods. With good property values, replied the human with a snort. Look, I grew up downwind from 3 different factories. One made tires, one made fertilizer, and nobody really knew what the third one made, but it turned the snow purple. Every February, the researchers exchanged horrified glances. The gelatinous psychologist had turned a distressed shade of mauve. And your species survived these conditions? Asked the Arachnian. Survived. We paid extra to live there. Great. School district. Impossible, muttered the junior technician, the developmental impact alone. Yeah, 3 eyes, extra thumb glowing in the dark. We've heard all the jokes, the human interrupted. But seriously, that gas you pumped in here, amateur hour, when I was a kid, the air in my bedroom was so thick you could chew it. Mom used to say it built character. Your maternal unit deliberately exposed her offspring to mutagens. The gelatinous psychologist was now recording every word for what would undoubtedly become a groundbreaking paper on human psychological aberrations. Not deliberately. It was just there everywhere. If the wind blew from the east, your eyes would water. From the west, your skin would itch. From the north, well, nobody talked about what happened when it blew from the north. The human shuddered dramatically, then laughed at the researcher's reactions. I'm kidding. From the north, it just made all the neighborhood dogs bark in harmony. Kinda pretty, actually. The chief researcher was struggling to process this information. Yet your species shows no signs of systemic neurological damage. Oh, we're definitely damaged, the human assured him cheerfully. but not from the chemicals. That's just from the crushing existential dread of late-stage capitalism completely. Different issue. The research team took a collective step back from the observation window. Something about the humans' casual relationship with environmental toxins made them deeply uncomfortable. It challenged everything they understood about species, survival, and adaptation. "Let's try one more variant," suggested the chief researcher, his scientific curiosity getting the better of his growing unease. Formulation X27. The room fell silent. Even the junior technician looked alarmed. X27 has never been tested on sentient subjects, whispered the Arachnean. It's theoretical, at best, catastrophic. At worst, this subject has proven resistant to our standard compounds. Argued the chief researcher, X27 represents our most advanced understanding of fear biochemistry. After a brief but intense debate during which the human whistled tunelessly and appeared to be napping, the decision was made. Formulation X27, a compound so potent it had to be stored in a quantum-sealed container to prevent it from inducing panic. In nearby star systems would be deployed. Preparing minimal dose of X27, announced the junior technician. Handling the controls as if they might bite. Environmental seals at maximum. All non-essential personnel should evacuate to safe distance. Several researchers hurried from the observation room. The gelatinous psychologist extended a pseudopod to activate the emergency containment protocols, just in case, dispersal in 321. A barely perceptible shimmer entered the chamber, more like a disturbance in the air than visible gas. The researchers held their breath, their various respiratory organs constricting in anticipation. The human sat up straighter, sniffing curiously. His eyes widened slightly. The first genuine reaction they'd observed. "Now that's interesting," he said, his voice tinged with something almost like respect. "That smells exactly like the chemical spill we had in '02. They evacuated 3 counties, and a guy from the EPA showed up in one of those big bubble suits. He inhaled deeply, showing no signs of the convulsive terror the researchers had expected. I never thought I'd smell that again." They said the compound was completely neutralized. He looked almost nostalgic. That was a fun summer no school. For 2 months, while they decontaminated the building. Spent the whole time swimming in the quarry, had to shower with special soap afterward, but totally worth it. The chief researcher's professional composure finally cracked. "How are you not experiencing fear? X27 contains elements that should trigger primal terror in any carbon-based life form." The human looked genuinely puzzled. "I mean, it's just air. Right, weird. Air sure, but still just air." He frowned, thoughtfully. "Though I guess I did develop that weird immunity thing after the water supply got contaminated during my sophomore year. The doctors were pretty interested in that. Wrote some papers, immunity to neurotoxins." The Arachnean's voice was faint, more like a general resistance to environmental hazards. The human shrugged as if discussing nothing more remarkable than a pollen allergy, side effect of growing up where I did. Most of my graduating class had something similar, the ones who graduated, anyway, as the implications of this statement sank in something unprecedented happened in Laboratory 7 BOF, the Galactic Research Consortium's Xeno-Behavioral Studies Division. The chief researcher, a being with 17 doctorates and publications in over 300 scientific journals, experienced a genuine moment of fear. Not because of any gas or chemical compound, but because he suddenly understood what it meant to come from a world where breathing poison was so commonplace that it bred nostalgia rather than terror. And in that moment, the experiments. True success was achieved, just not in the way anyone had anticipated. Word of the human's inexplicable immunity spread through the research station faster than a quantum virus through an unpatched system. Within hours, scientists from other departments were inventing flimsy pretexts to wander past Laboratory 7B, hoping to glimpse the creature who'd huffed X27 and asked for seconds. The human, meanwhile, had been upgraded from test subject to research anomaly of significant interest, which entitled him to better accommodations and actual food instead of nutritional paste. It wasn't exactly a promotion, but, in the grand scheme of involuntary alien abductions, it represented a meaningful step up. "So let me get this straight," said the human, lounging. "In what passed for a comfortable chair in his new quarters, you guys have mapped the entire galaxy, developed faster than light travel, and figured out how to translate any language instantly. But you're completely baffled by a guy from Earth not being afraid of bad smells." The chief researcher who'd insisted on conducting this follow-up interview personally adjusted his position uncomfortably. "Your characterization oversimplifies the situation. X-27 isn't just a bad smell. It's a precisely engineered neurochemical trigger designed to activate fear responses at the most fundamental level of consciousness. Yeah, well, so is the air freshener they use in gas station bathrooms back home, but you don't see us making a big deal about it," the human replied, taking a bite of the synthesized approximation of an apple he'd been provided. It tasted like someone had described an apple to a computer that had never seen fruit. The chief researcher's note-taking appendage moved frantically across his data pad. "Your planet's atmospheric conditions are of great interest to us now. Our preliminary scans indicated pollutant levels within tolerable parameters for developing civilizations, but your testimony suggests localized concentrations far exceeding our models." "Look, Earth is complicated," the human said, tossing the fake apple core into a disposal unit. "Some parts are pretty clean. National parks, rich people's neighborhoods, that sort of thing. But where I'm from, let's just say the EPA inspection team drew straws to decide who had to visit EPA Environmental Protection Agency. They're the folks who show up after the damage is done, put up some yellow tape, and tell everyone the cancer clusters are probably just coincidence." The chief researcher's headstalk twitched with distress. "Your species knowingly permits carcinogenic exposure of population centers. Permits it, hell, we subsidize it." The human laughed, though there wasn't much humor in it. "Look where I come from. There's a chemical plant that's been, accidentally, releasing who knows what into the river for 3 generations. Every few years, they pay a fine that's less than 1 day's profit, issue a press release about their commitment to sustainability, and keep right on dumping, and you're governing. Authorities allow it. They give them tax breaks for providing jobs. Sure, the jobs come with an average lifespan reduction of about 15 years, but that just means reduced pension costs. So everybody wins except, the actual workers." The Arachnian researcher, who'd been silently observing from a corner, finally spoke. "We had theorized that humans possessed unusual resilience given the conditions of your planet, but we never suspected environmental self-sabotage as an adaptation strategy." "Oh, it's not a strategy," the human corrected. "It's just good old-fashioned greed. Why spend money making sure your industrial byproducts won't cause three-headed fish W? Adapted within your own lifetime, not over generations. Adapt or die, right, and dying wasn't really an option. Had bills to pay." The Arachnian approached her scientific curiosity, overcoming her initial trepidation. "This raises profound questions about human physiological potential. If your kind can adapt to such extreme conditions within a single lifespan, then imagine what we could do if we actually tried," finished the human with a grin that made both researchers instinctively back up a step. The meeting was interrupted by an urgent communication. The station's high administrator, a being of such exalted rank that it communicated exclusively through subordinates, requested an immediate briefing on the human subject. "This is unprecedented," whispered the chief researcher once the communication ended. "The administrator never takes personal interest in individual research subjects." "I'm special that way," the human replied, stretching lazily. "So what happens now? More gas chambers, Maybe try some radiation next, because I spent 3 summers as a lifeguard at a pool built downhill from a nuclear plant. So fair warning might be disappointed with those results too. The administrator will determine next steps, the chief researcher replied, standing. But I suspect your status may be reclassified, meaning your species may require significant reassessment. The consortium categorizes civilizations based on technological advancement, social development, and biological resilience. Your personal demonstrations may elevate humanity's classification considerably. The human's eyebrows rose. All because I didn't freak out over some fancy alien tear gas. All because you've revealed that humans may possess adaptive capabilities far beyond. Our current understanding corrected the arachne implications for galactic xenobiology and security are profound. As the researchers departed to prepare for their meeting with the administrator, the human leaned back in his chair, a thoughtful expression crossing his face. He hadn't asked to become an interstellar test subject or an ambassador for humanity's weird relationship with industrial toxins. But if his messed-up childhood in a polluted corner of Earth was about to give humans a leg up in the cosmic hierarchy, well, maybe those headaches and nosebleeds had been worth something after all. The High Administrator's chamber resembled an avant-garde theater more than an office, with dramatic lighting and unnecessarily elaborate architecture. The beings assembled represented 17 different species and 34 distinct governmental bodies. An emergency quorum convened specifically to address the human situation. So we're all in agreement. Then the administrator's translator converted their harmonic vibrations into comprehensible speech. Humanity represents a Category 1 biological anomaly, nods, gestures, and various species. Specific indications of assent rippled through the assembly. The question becomes, what do we know about it? Continued the administrator. A species. This adaptable presents unique challenges. In the adjacent waiting room, the human sat flipping through a xenobiology magazine, blissfully unaware that his casual relationship with environmental toxins had triggered an interstellar diplomatic crisis. Perhaps quarantine suggested a representative from the Security Council, their exoskeleton clacking nervously. Restrict human expansion beyond their solar system. And how would we enforce that? Countered another counselor. If their bodies can adapt to neurotoxins as easily as changing clothes, what exactly would we use to stop them if they decided to leave anyway? A somber silence fell over the assembly. We must consider, said the chief researcher, who had been granted temporary speaking privileges, that humans may not even realize their unique status. Their adaptability appears to be a survival response rather than an intentional development. All the more concerning, vibrated the administrator, unconscious capabilities can't be negotiated with or regulated. Meanwhile, the human had discovered that the magazine contained an article about Earth. He found himself alternating between laughter and indignation at its wildly inaccurate descriptions of human society. Apparently, the consortium believed humans communicated primarily through rhythmic sound vibrations, possibly music, and considered processed sugar discs, cookies, to be currency. Back in the chamber, the debate had reached a critical juncture. The simplest solution would be elimination, offered the Security Council representative, one well-placed asteroid untraceable. Absolutely not, interrupted the chief researcher. By the ethical considerations, we have no guarantee such an action would be successful, and if it weren't, he left. The consequences unspoken. There is another option, suggested the Arachnian researcher. We could recruit them. The proposal hung in the air, like an unstable molecule. Elaborate, commanded the administrator. Their adaptability makes them ideally suited for environments too hostile for our current exploration teams. The toxic moon of Zartha, radioactive rings of the Corvin system, places we've been unable to study directly. You're suggesting we hire the humans as what exactly? Toxic waste handlers. A counselor's tentacles writhed with skepticism. I'm suggesting a mutually beneficial alliance that acknowledges their unique biological capabilities. The Arachnean clarified. They gain galactic recognition. We gain access to previously unexplorable, to regions. As the council debated this proposal, the human was escorted in. He blinked at the assembly momentarily, taken aback by the grandeur before his face settled into its customary expression of amused indifference. So he said, looking around at the collection of the galaxy's most powerful beings. I hear you folks have some job opportunities involving terrible places nobody wants to visit. That is one interpretation of our discussion, admitted the administrator. The human grinned. Well, as Earth's self-appointed ambassador of bad decisions and worse environments, let me say this. We're definitely interested, and thus began humanity's unlikely rise to prominence in galactic affairs not through superior technology or military might, but through the dubious superpower of being able to breathe stuff that would kill anyone with sense enough to avoid it. Sometimes evolution's greatest achievements are just happy accidents of poor urban planning,